Hey, John.
Hey, what's going on?
And much. Working on the project.
How's it going today?
Yeah, that's going well. We've been having behind the scenes some spirited conversations on cost, so it's been very good. We're making progress.
Joe, you look like you're someplace we'd all like to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in my cabin in Vermont.
Is it one room more or less? Is it?
Pardon me?
Is it one room more or less? Is it that type of cabin?
Yep. It's like one big room with two sleeping lofts
Nice.
on about 60 acres.
Wow. No neighbors.
No neighbors. I just came out of the river. Fishing was good.
Okay.
Oh, good.
What'd you catch?
Rainbow trout.
Nice.
Dinner will be ready soon.
Oh my God, Amber, that dog over your shoulder. Oh, so cute. I thought he was fake at first, and then when it moved, I'm like, oh my God, it's our dog.
I thought it was a cat.
Well, that was my first thought because I have a cat probably that size, and then I was like, oh no, that's definitely a dog.
Yeah, he often acts like a cat, so.
Very well behaved.
Hello.
Great.
Just trying to close some windows. I got way too many windows open.
You too, huh? I went to share a screen just internally with our team today. I had 16 things open. It's like, I think it's time to close a few.
I am there. Okay.
Susan, I'm not sure if the mayor's going to make it. I know there's an event up at City Hall this afternoon.
Yeah, I'm sure he's at the Rockin' Revere Rebound.
There you go.
event.
That's what it was. I knew it.
Stacy and I have to miss because we're here instead of attending it, but I will send him a message later.
We
Let him
appreciate
know,
the
yeah.
two of you skipping it.
I have no problem skipping it.
Oh, I was gonna go.
Dr. Perella, why I see you, do I need a ticket to get into graduation?
Yes, everyone will require a ticket to get in. We will, you haven't received one yet? I think all school committee members was mailed.
Yeah, I heard from some of the others that they received something in the mail. I didn't receive anything. I'm not offended, but.
Okay, I'll check with.
I wonder if John, if your office has Stacy's current address. She moved recently.
Oh,
I moved in December. I've been getting all my pay stubs and everything are under the new address.
Let me check with Gina. I will text her tonight, and I can make sure you get that ticket tomorrow. Either way, Stacy.
You want me to do it? I'm sure you have enough on your plate.
Oh no, I can handle it. I'll make sure you get that. But thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Ace, I don't think they wanted you to go.
It's not going to be the first time.
Don't be a troublemaker, Jerry.
I've said since Jerry left, he's looking pretty good right about now.
She actually wants you back on committee, Jerry. I heard her say it.
Well, thank you. That says a lot. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I mean, not for all the right reasons, but.
What's that?
Not for all the right reasons, but the grass isn't always greener.
I understand.
Yeah. You know where I'm coming from.
Uh-huh.
So Jerry, you're not at Rockin' Revere's Rebound? You are committed to this just like Stacy and I.
No, yes.
No, Jerry will probably say he forgot. He didn't know he was having one.
No, I was there for a few hours today. I had enough of City Hall. How's that? All good.
Sue, what's this? Jerry, how's your scorecard? Did you finish your homework?
Yeah. Let me take this call. We're not starting yet, are we?
We are. It's 5:33.
We do have just now with
Saved by the bell.
this game, we do have 7, so.
Good, because I have a baby that will be getting up shortly. So Jim, get ready to put me on mute.
So are we ready to start?
I think so. Miss Susan, would you mind doing the honors?
Yes, and we're recording. Okay, very good. Okay, today is Thursday, June 3rd, 2021. Welcome to the Revere High School Building Committee, meeting number 10. Roll call of the members. Linda, did you want to take the roll call since for some reason I have it in a different order than you?
Sure.
And it kind of messes you up when you're keeping your meeting minute notes.
That's quite all right. Yeah, I also have a list of who's not here. So I'm going to start with, I don't see Mr. Hardy as being here, so I'm going to note him down as absent. I don't see Nick. Tracy Bronson Rizzo.
Here.
And Miss Susan Gravellisi, I see.
Here.
And Dr. Kelly.
Here.
And I don't see Carlson absent. Dr. John Perella
I'm here.
and Jennifer Hayes
I'm here.
and Richard Descay.
Here.
Excellent. I don't see Don Sharmella either, so I'm going to note him as absent. I know Nick Rystrom is absent. He emailed me earlier. We have Jerry Visconti.
Where'd Jerry go? Oh, there he is.
Jerry's here. Jerry, you're on mute.
I'm sorry.
So I am going to Michael Picardi, do you want to note you're here?
I'm here, present.
Excellent. All right, perfect. We are going to kick this off then with, we are going to vote to approve meeting minutes for the last meeting, which was on May 20th. They were emailed out earlier today.
Motion to accept the minutes from May 20th.
Second.
Second.
Jerry and Susan, both second. And there's the key. Okay, so we're going to do roll call to vote starting with Mike Picardi.
Yes.
And Stacy,
Yes.
Susan Gravellisi,
Yes.
Dr. Diane Kelly,
Yes.
and Dr. Perella,
Yes.
Jennifer Hayes,
Yes.
Richard Descay,
Yes.
and Jerry Visconti.
Yes.
Excellent. We have approved minutes, so I am going to essentially kick this off to the Perkins Eastman team to see, not sure who wants to be driving today. if it's Dawn or if it is Bob.
I have it open. I'm happy to share.
Great. Yeah, Dawn, I
Just
can
gonna
take it
hold
over
on.
at the sites, I was going to say.
Okay. Or do you have the PDF, Brian? Do you want to just, I think Bob's only got 4 or 5 slides if you want to.
Yeah, I do. If you, let me see. Actually, Linda,
Whatever
if
works.
someone could pass me screen sharing, I'll just run it. Perfect. Let me just get the right thing up here. Excellent. Let me know if you can see that.
We can see it.
Yep.
Okay, so as far as the schedule update is concerned, Brian and Dan, go ahead and add if you would like to, but you can see that we've made our way through, obviously, the visioning community, full faculty meetings. We've had our second community meeting, faculty focus groups. We're pretty much complete. We have a couple, in fact, we had a couple focus group meetings today. So we're taking some of the information that we learned from those focus groups, and it does affect the program and the space summary. So I'm trying to catch up with that, and I hope to have something out soon. We have also started to initiate the business and community partner groups. And so for right now, we're pretty close with identifying what these might be as spaces in the building, what types of labs. But we're gonna move the follow-up of these meetings a little bit further out. Just the timing's not good with the end of the school year and the demands on the superintendent and the educational leadership team. So, so we've got good placeholders for now, but we're gonna continue these business and community partner focus groups probably in the summer, but really in the fall, we'll start to get more detail on those. So where we are now is May is over. The space summary is lagging only a little bit in that, as I said, we had some focus groups that were pushed out a little bit, but this should be wrapped up pretty much this weekend. We'll definitely have that wrapped up. Planning options then begin. We usually, right now we have the test fits. If the sites are reduced and further refined, we sometimes zoom in a little bit closer into the plans and develop them. Most of this work really happens in the next phase when we take those preferred options and get into more detail. But we'll be through the month of early June, we'll be assessing the options. The costs are starting to get developed now. Mid-June, we're looking for school committee approval on the draft educational program. The first version of the educational program has been completed. There's some markups and some refinements to make. So we hope to see that just before the June 15th meeting. And then later in June, in fact, I'm not sure whether it's the 17th or whether it gets pushed to the 24th, but the drop dead would be July 1st to get a formal vote on those preferred options and the submission. We usually take about 2 weeks to assemble the report, but we can of course be assembling the report just prior to that decision. So I don't know if we've set a date for that actual vote. And July 2nd is our submission to the MSBA for the PDP. This is the preferred design program, and it's the first half of feasibility. So we'll be continuing. We had a community meeting tentatively scheduled for next week, and it seems like the timing again, it's going to be better served getting pushed out. So we're talking about a mid-July date at this point. Anything to add, Brian, Dan?
No, I do think that I think the initial layout of the SBC meetings was that we wanted to, on the 17th, really present final costs, schedules, et cetera. We'll get a preview of that tonight. And then I think we were talking, make sure we do all the scoring and determine what options are moving on the 24th. And then the 1st was really just a formal vote to submit the entire package to MSBA. But that can evolve if needed in the coming weeks.
Great. If there's no questions, can move on to a few
I have a
updates.
question.
Yep.
I have a question. Okay. Just for the June 15th meeting for the school committee approval of the draft education program, would you be able to give that to the complete school committee at least a few days in advance so that everybody could have time to review it? I know, like, you know, with these meetings, we're expecting it and I get them an hour or so before, so I have time to review what we're going over tonight, but that's not always the case with the whole committee.
Right. I guess I'll defer to John and Diane. The educational program really comes from the district, so we've been reviewing it with the district. We've already got good progress, and I guess it's a question of whether we can have that done.
We anticipate that you'll have it next Thursday, Susan, with the packet for the committee, the
Oh,
Thursday
perfect.
prior to the meeting.
Perfect, thank you. Like I said, I mean, Stacy and I are aware of what we're looking at, but, you know, just so the others have plenty of time to be able to go over it for the approval.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Great.
And I'll just add for Susan and Stacy, because I know the committee members are going to have questions for you about it. It's a first draft, and it does need to be submitted to the MSBA, but there will be room for edits down the road as we evolve our plan through this process.
Thank you.
Sounds good. If there are no other questions, Bob, want to move it?
Yeah, keep going through on the educational program itself and the initial space summary. Diane, please feel free to pipe in to get me to stop. But what I was going to do is just run through the outline of the contents and maybe hit a few highlights. So I think there are a total of 17 or 19 categories that the MSBA has. They're lettered A through, I think it's I, I'm not I, next page. And I'll have it back up. I guess through F because they have the day and week of a student. So go back one. Basically, what the MSBA marches through is they want to hear about the grades and school configuration, what you have now. So the ed program describes the schedule, the credits are required. There's really no change here. For class size, the district doesn't have a formal policy, but we have targets of 23 students per classroom as a typical average, and that's where the MSBA defaults. But because we also have a freshman academy, the goal there is to target 20, and then for EL students to target 15. So that's important to note, and it does affect the amount of space that's needed, the number of rooms that's needed. As far as the school scheduling, there's probably sustained talks about the block schedule and maybe making modifications, but for the purpose of submitting to the MSBA, there's no change. So it's a 4-block, 5-day cycle. The teaching methodologies and structure, it really goes through the administrative and academic organization. So the school has listed the admin department and the departments, the fact that there's a freshman academy and that will continue. The various curriculum for English language arts, math, science, social studies, world language, and English learners are described. There's a highlight basically for competency-based learning, the need for flexible space, for accommodating varied groupings, and technology integration throughout. As far as the supports for students, this details a little bit about guidance and also the social workers and the desire to have a separate career center. The MSBA also asked about teacher planning and room assignments, and we know that you're between ownership and some teachers that don't own rooms. The ownership is shifting basically so that teachers will use workspaces and that no one technically owns their classroom. But a lot of this is also left up to the school with how you manage it, but for the MSBA's sake, it's non-ownership. Pre-K and kindergarten obviously don't apply. The MSBA asked about the food service, which would continue as full service kitchen. Right now you have 4 seatings and a need for more and varied space for social purposes and also for multi-purpose use. Next. It continues to ask or prompt about technology, including the media center. So the school has a one-to-one device right now. Desire for seamless tech integration and support to continue. The media center is thought of as a learning commons, as most of you know, with STEM and writing centers also incorporated. The visual arts, there's a need for 4 flexible spaces with ample storage and display, and the idea that the community would use some of these spaces. Performing arts details the need for the music and the practice rooms, but also theater, arts, and performance space. For physical education, there's a description to continue and expand the activities for lifelong health and wellness. For separate education, there's a detailed list of the subset programs, the life skills programs and needs, the OTPG speech, Coast Collaborative, and the offices associated with that. And for Voc Tech, I think one of the important things is that we're talking about non-Chapter 74 spaces and adding in maker, hospitality, sustainability, and kind of a marine science component or aquaculture. For transportation, it details the continued free transportation as the intent in the availability of morning, afternoon, and late bus. For the functional and spatial relationships, this is really talking about how the school should be organized. So we just highlight here, there's a desire for a heart to the school, the community zones, and the academic neighborhoods. There's obviously a lot more detail in the actual educational program. It's about 30 pages, and we'll be providing that, but these are just some of the highlights. For security and visual access, we talk about controlled entry, lock-off layers, and of course the systems that will be added for safety. And then other programs, there's a description here of student activities, the dual enrollment and North Shore Community College, the Mass General Health, Community Health Center, the credit union, and also district offices, including transportation. And the last element that they have is really just a kind of an outline of the day and week of a student, kind of what's the sequence of what students go through. So those are some of the highlights. Diane, did you want to add anything?
No, I think that hits it. I do want to, Jen Hayes had asked me a question privately in the chat, and I replied to her, to everybody. So I hope she doesn't mind, but I'm just going to share it out loud. She was asking if we would have a dedicated space for our ELS Life students, and I was saying that, as our plan evolves, that's one of the things that we could choose to do if we go with the neighborhood model, which seems to be where people are inclined. We could have an ELS Life neighborhood that would have, the resources embedded and not have kids entirely separate from the rest of the school community, but still have that kind of cluster feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And those types of things will, I think, get flushed out further when we dive a little bit deeper into the plans and start to lay them out, because then we can ask ourselves all those questions about how do we want to set up the neighborhoods or the adjacencies.
And then those decisions, as I was saying before, the educational program that we're going to submit to MSBA after these approvals from the school committee and from this board will evolve over the next year as we make those decisions, and the educational program will be updated as appropriate.
Right. Any other questions on the educational program? If not, we can move. So the space summary is still a work in progress. The numbers that I'm sharing here are really I'm just going to go over the highlights. They've already moved a little bit, but I think the total numbers are the same. The important thing here is that you can see, sorry, got too many dogs in and around the house. We've got, as far as core academic space, we're asking for more than the MSBA would default to. And some of that is because, as I said up front, we've got targets for smaller class sizes, and smaller class sizes generates the need for more rooms. So this is, the first iteration of this that will go in, and the MSBA will vet it and ask questions. You can see that basically we've got, it still needs to be flushed out, but a lot of these are what are considered small group rooms, or 2/3 classroom sizes. They're about 600 square feet versus 900 square feet. We've got a lot of those, and those were based on smaller room sizes, but we need to have continued conversations as to whether that that is the right thing to do, or whether they should all be the full-size classrooms. Special education, we're about on the MSB's default. It really doesn't matter what they have for a default number. We build it from the ground up with the needs that you have and the projected needs. So we just happen to be about 1,000 under the MSBA default. We're aligning in most of the categories, like art and music, meeting all the needs that you have. Voc and technology, we basically have the allowance of spaces. Just today, I was charting out all the actual spaces that we're hearing from the user group meetings, and they seem to fit within these allowances. Under physical education, we have a need for an extra gym station. That's based on the quantity of students that you have. So that's a calculable justification that we'll be putting forth to the MSBA. They consider 3,000 square feet, which is like a half-court gym, as being a station. So we're adding what we think you need. The media center, we're on target. Auditorium, this is one where the MSBA defaults to a 750 seat max, they would say. They do allow districts to go beyond the 750 seat with allowing a total of 13,300 square feet, which is a 1,000 seat auditorium with appropriate stage and everything. And because the school is large in enrollment numbers, and the MSBA kind of caps it at a short 750 seats, we're assuming that the district will want to go forward with the maximum that the MSBA will allow. What this means is they allow you to build this, but they don't fund the delta between the 10,400 and the 13,300. So that would be 100% on the district. We're matching in dining and food service. In the next page, you can see we're matching with medical for the time being with admin and guidance. I'm going to continue to flush the program out based on the meetings we've had. Custodial, we're also so far sticking with the allowance we have. And then the really big piece that's different is other spaces. The MSBA doesn't offer any other spaces, but they allow districts to put in various programs that they want to try to have funded, but are willing to support on their own. So here, until we know otherwise, we're carrying district administration. I put in an allowance for parent information center, which I know you have right now at a different location, but it's come up in some of the meetings. So this is something we'll sort of talk through and decide whether a space should be provided in this school or not. We of course have the community health, the MGH Health Center. We have the credit union, a school store, and there were also comments about having possibly a small secondhand clothing space for students in need. So we put in an allowance for that. We have the school resource officers, security, and you have a student ID and IT space within the building. So we're carrying some square footage for that. And there's also transportation, which I have since learned really fits within probably the district administration. And again, these are getting flushed out a little bit further, but overall, we are net program 22,000 square feet over the MSBA. About half of this is in these other spaces. And then there's a grossing factor. So to account for corridors, mechanical space, thickness of walls, and all of that, there's a 1.5 grossing factor. So that 22,000 net program turns into 33,000 gross square footage larger than the MSBA default. And I'll just add that it's not uncommon. I have not worked on a school yet that matches the MSBA because again, theirs isn't specific to any school. It's just kind of general formulas and calculations. This is a fair bit over, but it's not unlike what we've seen in some large high schools, particularly with a lot of support and other needs associated with it. The MSBA also, in their space summary template, some of their items just don't scale up. Like the gymnasium is I think 12,000 square feet. So it doesn't matter whether you have 1,000 students or 3,000 students, that stays the same. And it really shouldn't. It should scale with the needs. So again, it's not uncommon for a large high school for these numbers to be larger.
Hey, Bob,
Yeah.
do you mind walking the committee through what the conversation is with the MSBA, the negotiation, I should say?
Yeah, so it starts with the formal submissions. The MSBA will review the space summary as part of the submission. They'll read the educational program, and often, they'll ask initial questions. They'll ask for more detail if we haven't provided enough detail. They usually ask for the detail anyway, or they'll table their decision. They don't usually give a check off right away. So for things like the gymnasium, we'll provide calculations that show, we'll actually put them into the PDP submission, but they usually ask for them again anyway. So for each one of these categories, what I've found is that the MSBA, if the subject or the line item like medical matches their guidelines, there are really no questions. Where the variants occur, they're looking for justification. And they do recognize it is good if we find areas where we don't need as much space, that helps balance where we're asking for more. I don't think we'll ever come close to the 22,000 net that we're looking for here. For other spaces, they'll go through each one of these. District administration, they've seen plenty of schools that build district administration. So they'll be real clear about not participating in the funds for that. And usually they, again, in this first submission, they don't usually just say it's approved, we just won't participate. They usually table their decision, subject to further submissions to the MSBA. Is that what you're looking for, James?
A little bit. I think a follow-up would be, is there any circumstance, and I think maybe the field house would be but any circumstance where the MSBA would say, almost like treat this like a VE item. Nope, we won't allow you to build the Com Health, or we won't allow you to build the 600. It sounds like at worst they're going to say, you may build it, but we won't participate in funding it. But will there ever be a chance where they say, it cannot be that, I guess the auditorium is another one that you mentioned.
Yeah. Back up one page. Most of what we've seen here, I've seen on other school projects, and I don't see anything that's a no. I see a few things that may really get snarled up in kind of proving or convincing the MSBA. The additional classrooms, square footage, I think it's completely explainable. Number one, the MSBA defaults to 850 square foot classrooms. They allow a range of 825 to 950. We're asking for 900 square feet, and the logic is clear that we have co-teaching in this school. We also have a desire for a little bit more activity and project-based learning. So that takes slightly larger classrooms. It's still within the MSBA guidelines, but cumulatively, they'll look at the 7,000 square foot overage and make a decision. They may press us to, sharpen the pencils. They may prompt for, what spaces here might serve dual purpose, or you can increase the utilization. But I don't see any resounding no's. The closest thing to a no that I do see is the special education we have within our square footage. Again, we're below the MSBA. We have something called adaptive PE, and that's relatively new to the MSBA. We've had it approved on 2 projects before this, but it came with a lot of discourse. Adaptive PE, for those that don't know it, is sort of the evolution of what OT-PT spaces are, where there's therapy that's provided, maybe individually to a few students at a time. But to advance the thinking, there's a desire to have special needs students participate in a gymnasium-like atmosphere with other students taking PE courses. So the idea that you're in a wheelchair, but you can still play basketball or you can still do other activities is relatively new, and it comes at a large square footage. 3,000 square feet is a gym station, a half gymnasium court. So we're pressing to have that as part of this project. The reason I say that might be on the MSBA's radar, we also have ROTC marching and drill space another gym station, 3,000 square feet. These start to add up to the MSBA as a larger gym, even though they're very specific for special ed and they're very specific for JROTC, because we want to combine them with the gym so that there's more benefit for community use and also to feel included. I imagine that'll be probably one of the tougher negotiations. But they could say no, basically.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the space summary? I will point out that this 427 here is a number we'll come back to a little bit later, and we can explain that, how that ripples into pricing.
I have a question about the gymnasium. I know that the preference from MSBA is to have smaller gymnasiums. Would it be possible to have more than one smaller gymnasium, or is that total square footage? Could we consider breaking that into two different areas?
The MSBA has a few rules around the gymnasium. They default to 12,000 square feet, and in their language, they will not allow, they won't even participate in a project, I think is the statement, with a gym more than 18,000 square feet. They don't want field houses, basically. If it's an existing space, you can renovate it. So what we're saying is they default to 12,000. We're saying we need 15,000 for what you have actually with requirements for PE. And then we're saying we'd like to attach the adaptive PE at another 3,000. That brings us up to the 18,000 limit that they see as a gym. But we also have JROTC space. So that's where I can see some difficulty. In Lowell High School, we made the case that yes, the gym portion, the total, we can't call it a field house, but the total gym space with adaptive PE was, Don, do you remember? I think it was 24,000 square feet. So it exceeded their 18,000 square feet guidelines, but I think it was kind of a political issue, and it was a challenge. We had to convince over a number of phone calls and conversations that the gym portion did not exceed 18,000, but that there was a mutual benefit to co-locate the adaptive PE with it. And it was a struggle, but they evolve too. So maybe we've already kind of blazed that trail. Maybe we haven't. Maybe we'll find out.
Bob, I'm not sure if I just want to make sure I got the question right. I think it boils down to that 18,000 square feet that we're going after. Could it be two 9,000 square foot separate spaces?
I
actually don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, sorry, John. Was it John that asked?
Yeah, actually, the question was more of could we have two, for instance, larger spaces, or is that the total space that they'll allocate overall for any physical education center, or is it all for one gym? So is it all that they don't want one large gym, or can we have two smaller gyms, let's say, that exceed the square footage that's under the guidelines?
That I don't think it's come across.
It could not exceed the 18. I think theoretically the 18 could be subdivided into two smaller gyms as opposed to one, if that programmatically worked better. But the two real hard stops that not only will they not participate in, they will not allow a project to proceed with, are that 18,000 square foot threshold for the gym, or potentially 9 for 2, and the auditorium going over 1,000 seats.
Okay, good. And I think before we leave this slide, if you go to the next one, actually, Brian, as we were looking at, so just for the committee's benefit, the existing high school, we're looking at what, 336,000 was the current space?
394.
Oh, 394. Okay.
Oh, sorry, that's guidelines. Sorry, I was misunderstanding what you were saying.
So just letting them know the existing schools around 336, and so clearly after we've gone through we can make multiple conclusions here, but clearly after we've gone through the needs, from an educational standpoint, it has grown, and from that point of view, it shows the need for a new school.
And John, even one point that came up on my last high school project, just coming back to sort of this realization of, you have more students than the auditorium, and there's a lot of discussion about the gym. Up in Billerica, it became important for them that one way or the other, we figured out how to get the entire student body in one space at one time. And that became an exercise of fitting people into the gym. If that's something that's important, we, again, can't make a bigger gym. We can't make a bigger auditorium than 1,000, but it'd be a good thing for the design team to hear if the goal is, a gym that theoretically with folding chairs could fit the entire student body. That is a lot of detail. We don't need to figure that out now.
It does affect the amount of exits and egress, which we ran into in Lowell, where they have a huge student population and lots of doors.
Yeah, that's exactly, in the PSRs, we're really designing the buildings. I think it's an important thing for you folks to know then, because it did exactly that in Billerica, and we at least left them with a gymnasium that they could get their 1,600 students in, even though there was no single space in the building like an auditorium that accommodated 1,600 students. Any other questions? If not, we will move on. I think the next section, I'm going to run with these next few sections. Anyone on the team or anyone on the committee, feel free to stop me. I think these next handful of slides are that you saw and what got emailed out. There's really nothing new here. I'm going to sort of rifle through them. And really the purpose of this is just to reset what the final options are that you're going to start seeing on these big spreadsheets that are hard to read, that are comparing budgets and comparing schedules. So there's, again, nothing here you haven't seen. We're still considering, we have 4 sites, and I think it's 11 or 12 options under consideration. The existing site is the first option, and 1A, these are mainly why we want to go through this, is just start to get you folks used to what option does what. Option 1A is a rebuild on the existing site. This option would be renovating a lot of the athletic space. If maintaining a higher square footage for athletic space is valued, this would be an option that some of you might score higher in certain categories. Otherwise, this obviously assumes the building's not available for future use.
Hey, Brian.
And sure.
Real quick, and I don't know if you know it on the top of your head or if Dan does, what's the existing size of the field house?
28, 24 or 28,000, Dan? Do you remember 28?
Almost 29. Yep.
Almost 29. 28
So
stuck in my head.
As compared to the 18,000 that we were just discussing?
Maximum.
All right, so that's something good for the committee to know. All right.
Yep.
There's also just, don't lose sight of the fact there are some, there are like alternative PE spaces that are like weights and fitness that are a few thousand, but it's not typically part of the larger gym. So just something to think about.
Sounds good. We won't be necessarily going through on this meeting. Next meeting, we're going to show you detailed schedules about how the stuff would happen, but this is a slightly longer construction duration because we'd be working our way around the site with renovation and addition in some sort of phased manner. And, some things we'll start to see in the details is we think we'd need modular classrooms to pull this off. So there's budget plugs and items for that. This option and another, I'll point out that we're not in the numbers that you're going to start seeing tonight and in the coming weeks. We are not right now carrying eminent domain of this East Mountain Ave area. It's something that could be studied with this option and a few others moving forward. But I did just want to point out as we hit the options, which ones really contain eminent domain, which ones don't, and which ones might be able to if it's desired to study in the future. The key is that we know we can build a building here. If there's a major benefit to site work and fields, that could be investigated further in the next phase. Option 1B is the probably the heaviest residential eminent domain option. The only thing noteworthy for this and what you're about to see is we've assumed that if this ever were to come to fruition here, we would be dropping this building. So we're assuming that this option does take out the existing building. We are carrying demolition for it and field work over here. So this option would result in a whole lot of eminent domain, a different schedule, but we assume the end condition, since these are so close, would be that this ends up all fields. Option 1C is the new build out on Ericola Park and does involve Article 97. Again, we'll get a little more into schedule in the upcoming meetings, but this would be to replace the parks where the building was. This obviously also drops the existing building. No eminent domain is being carried in this. This is the other option where potential eminent domain of these East Mountain Ave areas, or some subset of them, could be studied if the committee were to desire that, to see if that gives us any relief for the building or site work or parking.
I have a question, Brian.
Sure.
Could you explain in simple terms what Article 97 is for some of us that don't really know what it is?
Sure. It's really that any place in a city or town in Massachusetts that is used as a park, whether or not it's got a sign that says it's a park, if it's maintained and folks go there to use it, public organizations, members of the public, people from the neighborhood, people from anywhere in the city, Article 97 protects that land from being developed without a legislative process, basically. So this, the permitting path for this option would involve permitting with the state to basically, I'm going to say, promise that we will replace what's at Ericola Park in kind, as they say, over here. So we're temporarily taking this park, which is protected by Article 97, out of commission, but we are committing to putting it back over here. So that's sort of the, even if it was a grass field somewhere that a city or a town just mowed and was used as a play field, Article 97 would theoretically kick in to protect development on that land.
Okay. Is there like a generalized time frame that this legislative process takes, or it just could be endless?
Not endless. It does take a while, but I can sort of tell you now, and I can show you graphically at the next meeting, is based on we would have to apply for this. We would have, let's say this option were selected some point this fall. We would, once this goes to vote, once the project passed, was fully funded, we would be going right at the Article 97 paperwork. We have 14, 18 months of design that Article 97 paperwork should definitely be able to be completed in. That includes it going all the way to the State House. So because we have a design phase where we can't go build yet and put a shovel in the ground, we're not seeing an impact necessarily to Article 97. It's a process, but it's a process that can happen concurrently with the design of the building. And as of what we think right now, it shouldn't push out construction. It could take 6-7 months. It could take 10-12 months, but we have more than that to get it done.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Option 1D is another, this is both Article 97, because we would be temporarily taking out Ambrose Park and replacing it back in here somehow. And we would also be eminent domaining a small area than this vast area over here, but coming out to the, is that Revere Street? I forget. I think that's Revere Street. So this option right now, we are assuming, since we're removed, even though it's a challenge to fit this park back in, we're assuming for now that this option, we should carry this building being maintained. So we're not carrying demolition costs rippling into the comparative cost analysis for this option. The option right next door, we assume you'd pretty much have to drop this building. If we were somehow to build over here, there probably is space to relocate the park and keep this building. We would probably just have to get creative with distributing parking. Parking in this scheme could become tricky and might be something that we talk about, subgrade parking or something, if this option gets developed. Over at Wonderland, we've seen these slides, we know where it is. We have an option 2A and a 2B. 2A is basically the option to carry, considering that this is going to end up more remote, to carry a full palette of fields to locate just about everything. These don't consider this stadium. We've been told pretty clearly to assume that Harry Delarusso stays the stadium under lights, but this would be trying to move as many athletic programs that might not be primetime games on site. And option 2B is leaving some degree of space that we see up here for future development unrelated to this project by the city. One way or the other, both of these options are queued up as we would have to eminent domain or come to some negotiated price to acquire the entire site. And there would be a sub decision based into that of, which one of these options makes more sense, even if the option is as many fields as we can fit. Based on some decisions I think the city has to consider, namely is, do we want to leave room eventually for an MBTA stop in here somewhere? Either of these options could be pushed and pulled during PSR. So for right now, though, we're really just saying full slate of fields. This carries a lot more site work, and we have to make sure we handle the stormwater if we're building over here. Theoretically, if we're building smaller, some future development would handle stormwater for this area, and the school area that we're building would be here. The other item to note on this one is we've heard it loud and clear that this option is going to need to study a better pedestrian connection back to the existing site. We're not carrying any costs for that right now. If a Wonderland option needs to be studied further in the PSR, we do think that's something that needs to be talked about, but we're going to talk about it anyway in the PSR because we've heard Dan and I and some folks had a meeting with the fire department this week just to run through options. And one of the comments they pointed out was, even at the existing site, if we build there's a stream of students that come from the eastern part of the city, Shirley Avenue, that are coming down through Bell Circle one way or the other. And if we're putting the high school on the existing site, we still want to study if there are some improvements. There's been talk historically of a flyover, et cetera. So one way or the other, we're not building costs into that to what you're seeing tonight and what you're seeing in the next few weeks. But I think both of them are variables we study as these options survive moving forward. Housing Authority site, real quick, we have a large, a medium, and a small. We've talked about these. This is how we're peeling them out. You'll see in a minute that these drive different costs for site work, eminent domain, et cetera. But for now, it's really 3A is big, 3B is medium, 3C is small. Furlong Drive is in here, and we've had a lot of discussions about what would this displace, what wouldn't it displace. Right now, at least how the analysis is queued up, this might evolve in the coming weeks, and it's one of the reasons I'll note that again in a few minutes. But we're starting to think that eminent domain of the multi-unit residential buildings over on this side towards the police and fire department would need to be included to give us a clear path in and out of Revere Beach Parkway. We don't believe we'll ever get valid access off 1A for a lot of reasons. So this option right now is in a little bit of an evolution of what do we carry for eminent domain costs. The numbers that we have on the chart right now basically maintain most of the single and double residential units in the trailer area, and right now are queued up to sort of eminent domaining our way in to get our own control of the access here. They're also carrying a premium for a double lit intersection out here. We do think on this option, since we'd have to come in off Revere Beach Parkway, we need a light on both sides. That's a little bit helped by Tomasello, and that intersection down here is actually moving further towards Beachmont Station as part of the development of the Suffolk Downs project. So this postage stamp that you're seeing is still in evolution. One other thing to note about this site we've learned that's going to show up big time in the comparative cost analysis is we need to assume that this site's chock full of contaminated soils based on previous city projects, both over here at the police fire station and at roadwork in the surrounding area. So right now, we think this is the only site with a real environmental premium, and we're assuming we would have to strip the top 3 feet of soil and build up that 3 feet of soil with clean fill to be able to really pull this project off. So that's the kind of detail that comes with a cost premium. We wouldn't need to do that at the existing site, where we have no reason to believe we'd need to do that at Wonderland. Wonderland does have some baggage with underground foundations and whatnot, but we're covering that in demo costs. So I'm going to jump right into this spreadsheet, but I'm going to jump into Excel because it's easier for me to see this. So this was emailed around, and I want to address a couple of things up front. One is that this is a draft, and that's the main reason you don't see convenient totals at the bottom. I'm sorry for those of you that might have gone right to the bottom and tried to look for a total. There isn't a total here because this is a draft. There's a whole lot of data in here about square foot costs, percentages to carry for contingency, and particularly escalation, when we're thinking the midpoint of construction is going to be. That is still a work in progress. And some of these decisions that the project team, Perkins Eastman left field, the Perkins Eastman's estimator are going to discuss in the coming days are, do we have the right square foot values? We've been discussing it. There's ongoing research. We're looking at other recent bids, other projects. And some of those decisions, for example, if we move a square foot value from 425 to 500, ripple out into tens of millions of dollars. So for right now, we didn't want anyone jumping to the bottom line and seeing what these add up to, because it's going to vary between now and when you see this in a few weeks. I can promise that we'll get a clean version out well before, not 2 hours before the meeting in 2 weeks. We'll have it well done by then. The other high level point I want to make is this is not a budget. This is a comparative cost analysis. And going back to some of the fluidity in what Bob presented earlier, we still are not positive what the final square footage is going to be. We still don't know what some of the details are. This exercise doesn't set up a budget. It just sets up a means to apples compare every job to each other, and it exposes which sites have cost baggage for the same size building. It's sort of a theoretical exercise. That's also why we didn't total this for right now. The last reason we didn't total this is we're going to be running reimbursement projections on all these options. And the total to Revere, typically the total to the local municipality is the most important piece. And we haven't done that yet because we are really waiting to get a few of these things set in stone and then run all the numbers, including some of that space. The discussion we had earlier about MSBA will allow you to build it, but they won't participate. That shuffles into these options about what the reimbursement is going to be. So those are the real high level points. This is a draft. This is not a budget. It's a comparative cost exercise. The high level points, and what I wanted to do now is zoom in a little bit. Well, high level, all the options we just went through are shown across here. We separated the base repair option. This is the option that simply brings the existing building up to code. It does not implement all those spaces that Bob went through before. It just renovates the building in place, brings it up to code. So this is sort of its own option that I think you guys want to judge almost independently from these other ones, but we have to consider it has to be here. All of these options after this gap over here are either a reno or a new build. And right now they're laid out to about the order that they're laying out in cost-wise, with the new build on Aracola Park appearing comparatively that it's shaking out to be less than what's way over on the right here and behind my meeting controls, the big option at the Housing Authority. So I understand these don't total, they don't show what your grant might be yet, but for now they're laid out. If we took a snapshot tonight, least expensive on the left, most expensive on the right. And what I wanted to do tonight is really just zoom in and buzz down these categories, not necessarily go through every cell. We will go through every cell with you at the meeting in 2 weeks, and I think we should. That discussion could take 45 minutes, an hour, just as fair warning. But for tonight, I just wanted to make sure people understood what we were doing and to just show some differentiators. And you can ask us any questions you have. You can email us questions. The first category here is cost to obtain. Any of the options that we wouldn't need to eminent domain or could study eminent domain further, net out as a zero. It's one of the things that helps them in this snapshot show up on the left side. The options, you can see as we scroll right, some of these options that really end up on the higher end have large cost to obtain. For example, the all-in at the Housing Authority. And quick note, these postage stamp graphics I did not update. So we will update these. This will have the big version. But with $98.6 million of potential site acquisition for that site, you can just see how, at least in this category, you can see how the options float towards the bottom. Primarily, one of the biggest drivers is because we wouldn't have to eminent domain, and we could put a shovel in the ground sooner than the other options.
Well, and Brian, if I may, on the Housing Authority, the reason why those numbers were so large is that we're treating as a cost to obtain is the cost to replace the units existing. You know, it may not be a part of this project, but certainly it is going to be a cost to the city of Revere. And so we're treating it as a cost to remain. So that's why, if you look at the values, you know, to replace 340 units, you know, we have a figure over there where it's approximately, I think, 270,000 per unit, and that's where that number comes into play.
Correct. So moving down the blue category here is site development costs.
Brian, just to comment here. So if in fact some cost is actually not going to be part of the project, I think it's important to note that this will be a cost to the city, but probably as a comparative of the projects, I would suggest you might not want to include it there. You want to include it as an outside number.
On a inside note there, Joe, I'm glad you pointed that out, because Brian and I were going back and forth on that. He tended to agree with you, and I moved it up. So no, thank you for saying that.
Yep, we'll note it either way, and I'm fine with it landing wherever, but I think it does clearly, if someone were to print this out and walk away with it, we just need to make sure they know that those costs aren't part of this project. They would be part of the total impact to Revere.
Yes.
Right, and the reason in the case of the housing authority, I mean, in some cases it may be, you know, oh, some donor just gave you money, you don't have to make it part of the project. But this, if there was a affordable housing project, then that's not just the cost, but it's a real value added to the city in another way. So that's why you might want to show it separate, but not just part of the cost of the high school.
Yep.
I agree with Joe. I was just about to make the same point that he did. We do anticipate that there'll be some federal grant funding around affordable housing coming out in the next couple of years. So separating that out from here and saying, you know, this is the cost that it would take to replace that housing, which may or may not fall on the city, because the city could apply for grant funding to help with that added value.
Understood.
Oh, thank you.
So the basics here are, and you just to run through these: quantity of displaced units, the assumed actual assessed value, a premium over the assessed value, and some of these have relocation fees. This is also part of stuff that we're cementing with both with Sleeper Associates and ourselves. So some of these numbers might vary. By the next time we put this in front of you, we're gonna this column will be 100% iced, done. The site development costs, just to break it down here, what we're really trying to do is we're taking a square footage for each option of, think about this square footage as the amount of square footage we need to push dirt around to make the, to recreate the site. It's really just a basic calculation of how big is the development area per site. And I mean, you can see it does vary from in the 800,000s to, on some of these bigger options, 1.4 million, 1.2 million square feet. And those obviously drive costs. We have the options. One of the reasons I mentioned some of these options contain demo for the existing building, some don't. We have to plug those values on this line. So options that do include abatement or demolition of the existing building have values. We have the demolition of eminent domain structures, which I'm going to give Joe, I think, credit for getting on my radar. Was there is a premium, and these numbers up here are just pushing dirt around. Right now it's 18. This is a number that we're debating a little bit, should it move? But that doesn't include ripping up underground foundations, underground tanks, etc. So we're carrying plugs right now of 25K a structure to demo as a premium for demo to clear a site for us. And right now we have a 35K plug for any commercial businesses on site. For the furlong option, that might go up a bit because we're assuming there's some pretty heavy duty underground tanks and some other items over in those oil businesses. So this might end up 25K for a house and more like 50 or 75K for a gas business. Traffic mitigation and signalization, the only one that has an entry there is furlong. That's the only one that right now we think we definitely have to add lights. Some of this might evolve as we go forward. Don't consider this if we have a zero, say at Wonderland, that we might not figure out we need lights at a Wonderland job as we really lay it out. But for right now, we know we'd need one at Furlong, and we don't know we'd need one anywhere else. Subsurface premiums, this is for two different things. Some of these items have a subsurface premium. The two Wonderland ones for stormwater. The systems to retain stormwater when they're down under the floodplain are pretty expensive, and it's calcing out that in the small option, if we were to be only developing a piece of the site and retaining stormwater, it could be a $5 million premium. If we're to handle all the stormwater, this basically means burying retention systems, digging up a lot more dirt, putting back systems that hold water, and then evenly disperse it out so it doesn't flood and so it doesn't push water onto a butter's property. The whole site could be more like 7.5 million as a premium at that site. You'll see a massive premium here on Furlong, and it's really one of the differentiators for this. That 20 million is the calculation for, at this point, we need to assume brownfield level conditions and strip that 3 feet of soil and bring back soil. That's a very phenomenally expensive number, not only because contaminated soil is expensive to deal with, but this means a whole lot of trucks coming back and forth. That would be, ultimately, if we're looking at an option that involves this, we would, as a point of data, I think, want to break it down into, this probably means 10, 15, something thousand trucks coming and going, but it's a premium that the other sites, we don't think it has. The other sites have. We think this site will need soil remediation unequivocally. Last is in the site category, there's a turf fields premium, 900K per synthetic field. The various options have various amounts of fields. That math just ripples out. That gives you a site subtotal. The next category is building cost, and this is the biggest category, but it's fired right at this point by some pretty simple calculations. Square foot of renovated space times a rate, square foot of new space times a rate. This rate is one of the rates that we're internally discussing of where should we end up here, and that's one of the items that we really didn't necessarily want to total this up and act like these are total project numbers yet. We just wanted you to know that's how the buildings are being compared, and that number in red is the number that I noted earlier that Bob talked about. We're assuming any of these new builds that aren't an ad reno, you'll see the ad reno only touches about 370,000 square feet. We're assuming any new build is going to hit that 427,000. That's one of the key reasons this is not a budget, because as we decide if that 427 is correct later on, all these would come down. And that's why people seeing these numbers and saying, I saw our number, that's the budget, is not the case yet. This is just comparing costs. The next category, I'll zoom out a little, and this is more if any of you consider fancy yourself math geeks, which I know we do have a few. This is the fun section where we're trying to capture all the contingencies and markups. The one that I'd like to highlight here is escalation. All these other items are really driven by the soft cost, the cost of the building and the cost of the site. So this number here on this new and existing option, the site and the building are calcing out to 216 million. All those numbers ricochet through a design contingency, a CM contingency. We're assuming on all these options we'll go CM at risk, not design bid build. That's a discussion for the next phase. That's ultimately a decision the building committee will make, but we think every option here is a Chapter 149A job. We think we have plugs for the owner's change order contingency and soft contingencies. We have plug for general contractor markups and phasing premiums for the sites that we're going to have to chase ourselves around and do the building in piece. But escalation is the big one that might change. This is basically taking the cost that we're telling you the building will theoretically cost are today dollar values. We're using this category to cast those dollar values out to, in this option, December 2024 is when we think the midpoint of construction would be if we built on Ericola Park. December 2025, a year later, is when we think the midpoint of construction will be if we are sort of slowly working our way around an ad reno. June 2027 is where the midpoint of construction might be if we have to wait out a eminent domain process. So this is the key driver here, and you can see that these escalation numbers 3.5 years out is telling us we need to carry $30 million to cover escalation. You can see how the longer this goes out, the more you're putting money into escalation. You're getting the same building, but we have to assume now the costs would escalate. 4% per year is what we're carrying here. There's been a lot of discussion about, is that the right number as well? So generally this section is all math, but it's mainly driven by time on escalation, which we'll review these schedules in more detail at the next meeting, and then percentage of hard costs, percentage of site and building costs down below and above.
Brian, one of the things that's been in the news a lot lately is the supply chain issues around construction and the way that has significantly increased cost of new construction in particular, but building in general. And I'm just wondering if this anticipates that issue will be gone by the time we're building, or if some escalation of price has been incorporated here due to that circumstance.
I'll take a whack at it, and I'd love to hear Lynn and James and Dan and other people. But I think right now we are in we're in a confusing little post-pandemic, coming out of the pandemic step right now, where some things are spiking dramatically. A lot of things that are related to shipping and getting things on time, getting parts and pieces for things that are even under order are being challenged right now. But I don't think we've built a spike into these numbers. I think the 4% annual is what the Boston construction market's been doing for, I would say, decades. And I don't think we've put in a specific penalty. Part of that reason for me is a lot of these construction points are so far out that there could be recovery by then. There could be cost correction by then. So we're assuming that the typical 4% a year is really the only penalty. But that's an active discussion of, is that the right way to approach it? I don't know if anyone else on the team had thoughts about that.
No, I would say that I agree with that. We haven't, and I don't think we should penalize based on the COVID, because one of the other things that's happening is pre these issues with supply chain and certain products being very difficult to get, we were also seeing dramatic decreases in some pricing as far as labor. So I also wouldn't go with I think what we should do is stick with what we were seeing before the pandemic and not try to, magic ball or what we might see and what we might think might happen, because we might be wrong. So I would suggest what we're doing is right. We're trying to kind of erase that period and stick with what we know has been the way it has been for decades.
Yeah, I would agree, not talking about the spike right now, but just so people understand, the escalation is a best guess risk factor. You got to have it because you got to be prepared for what could happen. The reality is it could be a lot worse. And I once bid Boston City Hospital in a time that prices were escalating, and we happened to bid it when the market crashed, and 10% was left on the table. So just so you know, a lot of these numbers are best guesses, but this one in particular, escalation is a hard one. Though, as Brian said, in the Boston, New England market, there's been a fairly consistent escalation for a long time. So I think their numbers probably as good as you can get.
And the challenge here is that the MSBA caps their reimbursement on your building at, I think it's $333 a square foot. That does over time go up. They reconsider that number. They have moved it up. It does move up, but it does not move up at the same rate as escalation. So the further out in advance you go, the more you're paying the bill, not them. But one other point I just wanted to make is two of these, the escalation value and the design contingency value. These values, by the time we're bidding the job, have basically flowed into the building value. They go to zero by the time we're bidding the job. So this comparative cost on this option is saying it's a $216 million building, but 32 million of design contingency eventually will be actual direct costs, and 21 million will be actual direct costs. Now, if we get a great bid, like Joe referenced, we're in great shape by the time we get to construction. But if we don't carry these numbers, we're at risk of being surprised at bid.
Brian, the 330 you just referenced from MSBA, that's in comparison to the 450 you have?
Yes. Okay. Yes, Joe. Yeah, yes. Basically, they're gonna cut off the cost of the box new construction cost here, they reimburse up to, I think it's $333 a square foot.
But it's calculated against your 450. I mean, another way of calculating cost is you can have in the escalation, the fee, the general conditions, et cetera. So they're not comparing it to that grossed up number. They're comparing it to the 450.
Correct, exactly.
Yep. Thank you.
Yep. So last on the bottom here, soft costs, relatively simple. Right now, the consultant and other soft costs, that's design teams fees, OPM fees, some other reimbursable consultant fees. 15% is the most round, easy way to think about that. I think MSBA caps reimbursement on these somewhere around 10 for the designer and 3.5 for the OPM. There's often some costs between those for other small consultants here and there. So we're carrying 15%. We are carrying an FF&E budget at your student count and a tech budget at your student count. MSBA reimburses up to $1,200 a student on both of these. In our experience, $1,200 a student for furniture is not going to get it done. We're carrying $1,800 for all the options. We're assuming all the options, new furniture, all the options, new technology. And by technology, I'm talking about devices, smart boards, if we're using them, projectors, stuff that we don't want to buy until the building's built. There's no reason to bid that technology stuff when we're bidding foundations and bidding the building. Anything could change in the 2 years it's going to take to get to a finished building. So these are the tech budget usually includes everything technology except the main wiring and conduit in the building. We would capture wiring and conduit most likely in the construction cost, but devices at the end of all those wires is in this tech budget. That usually is achievable for $1,200 a student. We might find out that these numbers vary, but MSBA caps reimbursement at $1,200. You can spend whatever you need to spend. You're just going to get reimbursed on $1,200.
So just so I understand, when you compared the program to the guideline program, if there's some overage there, the MSB won't participate. And I know you guys are going to go through a line by line on all their criteria, like the 450 versus the 330, and compare them and adjust that in your reimbursement rate. Am I correct that some of these things aren't even involved in that, like site acquisition, they don't participate in site acquisition?
Correct.
Yep. They're 0% of this cost. I'll try to hit them really quick in general. They do not participate in any of the cost to obtain. They have a cap on the site costs that relates to the size of the building. Yeah, 8% the value of the building. Is that it? Yep. So they would do a calculation of what's the value of the building. We will participate in whatever 8% of the value of the building is here. It will be less than 24 million. They'll only participate in a fraction of that. The building category, they cap at that $333 per square foot. And most of these contingencies, almost all of them are reimbursable become reimbursable with the exception of the owner's CM contingency and the owner's change order contingency. The CM contingency almost categorically wouldn't be reimbursable, and change orders, they have a whole process for 1% the value of the building. They might participate in, depends on what the change order is. So it's a breakdown, but you're right, Joe, some of these items get zero reimbursement, and land acquisition would be 100% on the city's dime in all of these options.
And I think at a high level for the group, the MSBA, if you can imagine, they're providing a formula and a template for the 300 plus cities and towns throughout the Commonwealth, right? And so they're choosing to participate. So they're limiting you. You're hearing like, why is there a limit on the auditorium, or why is there a limit on the gymnasium, or why are they putting a cap on fields? We need all those as part of a school. But so if you can imagine taking their big global picture, if you have a really small rural school who doesn't need a large gym or doesn't need a large auditorium or all the fields like Revere does, how do they? So the MSBA typically errs on the side of education. They participate in educational expenses, like direct, academic educational expenses. And you see, thank you, Dr. Kelly. 351. And so I don't know if that helps you, but that's why they have these odd caps, and why won't they build a full size auditorium?
It's often about equity. Exactly. That's the root of it. Their goal is to help out cities and towns, but it's to help out all of them. So it lends some degree of apples to apples equity to a project that could be large, could be small, could be in a city, could be out in a rural area. I know that was a lot of info, but we wanted to run through this just so you're familiar with the spreadsheet. We will be updating this. There will be a total project cost section down here. There will be an assumed projected, let me call it, MSBA grant that will subtract out to a cost to Revere. And there might be a few below the line type items that we just sort of note on these items, but we wanted to get you used to looking at this and forward any questions you have to us. It's going to be a work in progress up through the next meeting. I might even print out some of these if people it would really help read these on paper for the next meeting. We might try to get some printed on some big paper or something and allow you to have them. I know this is tricky to read, but by the time we get to voting on this in a few weeks, we'll want you to just really be familiar with what you're seeing here. Any questions on this budget stuff?
I just have one more comment. I've mentioned this to Diane. I've been on a lot of projects. The analysis that this team has done on the options, physically what the options would be, and then this analysis, and then I know there's a schedule analysis that's coming. This is really good stuff. I've seen people attempt this before, and some are good, but you got a good team. This is good stuff.
Appreciate it, Joe. We tend to like getting lost down the wormhole on some of these, to be honest with you. At least I do.
It's unfortunately true.
And I'll just, we're really lucky to have such a great team between the work that Joe's doing for us and Left Field and Perkins Eastman and all of the volunteers that we have on the call from the city of Revere who have different expertise areas. It's pretty amazing.
And to slightly build on that, one thing additionally that we're finding helpful, throughout this week, we were talking about these costs, even the hours before this meeting. Perkins and Eastman and Left Field, we're working on already, we're working on for the largest high schools amongst us in the state. And so we're asking, hey, what are we doing on Waltham? What's the cost there? What are we doing at Lowell? And so Joe's sending us, we're getting fresh off the, right off the press costs, and we're comparing, trying to apply all this latest, greatest information on, on Durfee down in Fall River, trying to apply it to this project, give us the best forecast.
If there are no other questions, there's just one more item that we wanted to cover pretty quick. Should I move on to just quick chat about the scorecard before the next meeting?
Yeah, and just before we go on, Brian, I wanted to acknowledge that Kyle Svensson joined the meeting. I don't know if that was noted. He's been on for a bit of time, but I didn't want to interrupt your presentation. But I just wanted to note that for the record.
You only know he arrived at 6:08.
Everyone here is allowed to interrupt me. If you haven't noticed, I can keep going. So you can always just yell if you need to. So, but that's good to note. Let me just jump into this file. So we don't, we're not voting tonight. This is the exact same info we've had sort of on the screen in a hard to read version on the Excel spreadsheet. I will be sending that spreadsheet out once we get all the postage stamps for the options correct. You folks might want to just use that spreadsheet to actually go in there and score. I wanted to put it in this Word file, same exact content, just copy pasted. And I wanted to make sure everyone was aware of what we're planning on doing here. All of this can be changed. It's all up to you. This is just a good starting point. We could either, this doesn't necessarily need a motion. for approval. But before we sit down and start scoring things, either tonight or at the next meeting, if there's discussion, I think we should just approve these categories. But you'll be scoring every option we just saw in every one of these categories from 1 to 4, 1 bad, 4 excellent. And what really just we wanted to do tonight is buzz down them and see if anyone had questions on like what they mean. And James sort of even prompted me thinking about this first one as an example. Delivery of educational program and vision. What's that mean? It really is in everything we've shown you to the point when you're voting on this. Do you feel an option inherently could deliver the educational program better than another option? Maybe you don't feel that way, and you can then just pick all of them get a 3, all of them get a 4, all of them get a 2. I would hope they all don't get a 2. That's basically saying you don't think any of them could deliver on the education. But if you think one of them sticks out above the others, or some of them have some drawback, you would score one below the other in this. And that's just sort of an example. Flexibility for future growth and design flexibility. That's really about how restrictive is the site. You might say, I like a version of a site and we should look at expanding out a little more. I'd like it more than. Impact to educational program facilities during construction. This is really one that it's a little less gray, a little more black and white. There's options that we're going to be hammering around that building with an ad reno should score low on this. The options where we're building right next to the building should score lower. And the options where we're building somewhere else entirely should score higher. Even the new build on Aracola Park maybe is in the middle or not great because we're taking those parks away. But the idea is, does the location of the building impact education during, before we get there, when we're just building it? We have a category for maintain. Yep.
I just wanted to go back to that first bullet and add a little bit of thought to it. You might say that, we're starting with a new or just a totally transformative renovation. So we're going to meet the educational program no matter what. But I will just say, if people are wondering, that the location of the site does translate directly into that kind of goals of accessibility for students. And if a building is forced into multi-story, it is harder to design it as a very connected heart or core to a school. Usually 3 stories is more conducive to have a very connected environment. If it starts to go 4 or 5, it gets a little bit more difficult. So I'm not sure anybody would know that off the cuff.
That's a good point. Well, that's a very, it's good that this one's first because it's hard to capture in a way. But Bob's right that every option we as a team present you will achieve the educational program. It's sort of, do you think that the location harms it? The example I was using when James and I were talking is I could see someone maybe saying something as remote as Caddy Farms, even though we're not considering it anymore. You might just say, we're not going to get the same engagement. We're not going to get, it's too far. But that's just an extreme example. Some of the build it here, build it there on the site, kind of a little harder to say whether there's really a delta. Cost and schedule here accommodates transition without swing space, allows commencement of construction ASAP, minimizes the duration, risk associated with site control. This is another, perhaps full-on eminent domain, bulk eminent domain is going to score low here. No eminent domain would probably score high, and Article 97 might score in the middle. That's just probably how I think about it. Do you think the building overall is cost effective? When we show you the cost per option with real totals, you'll have a better opinion on that. Cost risk is more about, is there a threshold locally that the city or the voters might not support the project? That's more what this is trying to say versus cost effective. Is there a risk to going so expensive that we might not be able to get this passed? Schedule risk is, do we control the schedule, or are we waiting for others to do a job that we can't necessarily control? And additional reoccurring admin costs. This would mainly just be something, this is one to debate. Do we need it? Do we not need it? But I guess inherently, if we're maintaining the existing building, the options maybe get a little bit less on this. But even if you don't necessarily agree with the category, you're free to flat grade everything. The best way to say this category doesn't mean anything to me is saying they all get a 4 or they all get a 3.
The big idea I'd put there, Brian, if I can, is some of these sites, if we select them, because of their difficulty in access without a vehicle, would significantly impact our transportation costs, and that would be an ongoing addition in perpetuity, and so that I think that is something that needs to be considered.
That's a great example of this category. The community category, a little more easy to understand, accessibility to community spaces, independent use of community spaces, ease of site access to the building. These are kind of all saying the same thing, but just different ways to come at it. Figure having a few different categories really makes you think about the differences. Where is the building? What's it going to be next to? What else is going to be on the site? Might influence your opinion here. Building itself, whether it addresses the existing facilities deficiencies. Responsible design is kind of an item I always struggle to explain, so I'm going to skip it and see if anyone else would like to. Ability to implement general building safety measures into design, visible entries, ability to implement sustainability goals. A lot of this, I will admit at this point, keep in mind you've just seen test fits, or you haven't seen what I think any of us would call project specific designs. This will come into a little more focus later, but right now should be about, are there deltas? Is a certain site really just boxed in, et cetera? Is another site not? But a lot of these, to Bob's point, we can pull off visible entries in some manner. It's just if we're up against the line of houses or something else, it'll be slightly harder to pull off a visible entry. The entry just has to end up where it ends up. And last is the site section. Traffic outside the site, traffic getting around the site. That's ability to get traffic in and around. Is it going to hamstring the site? Emergency vehicle access. Maximize the potential of student outdoor activities education. Safety and efficiency for pickup, drop off, etc. A lot of that has to do with, are we cramming this in somewhere? Achieves parking expectations is a little tricky right now, but again, it's just how much are we fitting on one site, or is it off by itself? Existing wetland soil, subsurface conditions, less concern at the existing site. Medium concern at Wonderland, high concern at Furlong. Impact to neighbors is something that you folks as locals, we rely on you. This is your opinion about where the building goes and what the impact of the neighborhood is. Achieves athletic program needs is more, are there enough fields? Are there not enough fields? Utilities infrastructure, this is probably a moot one, but I think it's often worth keeping here unless we find out some more items in the coming weeks about utilities and infrastructure. All of these sites will have their own baggage with utilities and infrastructure. Existing site has a lot going on, drainage. Furlong has drainage and sewer, and Wonderland has nothing. So they all sort of in their own way have infrastructure costs. I'm not sure at this point if any of them are real delta. And finally, we're getting into, is it central in the city, and are there any real permitting hurdles to cover? So those are the categories. Like I said, we don't need a motion on these, but what we need to do is not be debating these when we start voting. So up to the committee if we want to actually just cement them now, think about them to the beginning of the next meeting and do it then. But one way or the other, I'd just like everyone to agree that we're not going to change these once we actually start scoring.
I'm going to suggest that we take just a 30-second pause so people can think about that question and really kind of look through the 2 pages.
Yep.
And I guess while we pause, Perkins Eastman, yeah, I don't recall if Brian showed you this prior, but if there was anything that you had noticed, being missing or something, think about that too. But I think it's pretty comprehensive.
This for me is one of those exercises that you have to eventually just say, we think we've captured it, and stop thinking, because you could turn this into 1,000 categories if you wanted to.
I personally agree with the way it's presented. I don't have a problem with that.
Excellent.
Yeah, I agree too. I think Brian's right. We could go through this all day and add and take stuff off, but I think this is a good baseline. I'm good with it.
I'm happy with it too.
Excellent.
I am as well.
Yeah, it's up to you folks. Again, I know I've said it. We don't need a motion. It's more like if someone thinks they want to change this, then maybe now's the time to speak. That's how I'd phrase it. You're also welcome to just approve it.
So that we have it in the minutes, how about if I make a motion to accept the scorecard as presented tonight?
I'll second that, Carl Stenson.
Thank you both. Linda, could I ask you to run through a quick roll call?
Absolutely. I'm going to start with Mike Picardi.
Yep, I approve. Yes.
Memorial Day sale.
Stacy, can I get your approval for roll call?
Yes, sorry.
Thank you. Susan Guaralisi had to leave, so she has dropped off at 6:59. Dr. Kelly
Yes.
and Carl Stenson,
Yes.
John Perella,
Yes.
Jennifer Hayes,
Yes.
and Rich.
Yes.
And Jerry Visconti.
Yes.
Excellent. I captured everyone. Let me just go down the list one more time. You're good.
Excellent. That was all we had to cover tonight. I'm going to throw something out that's just because whenever we're looking at numbers, it's fun to actually talk about something that's a little more fun next month. I'd like you folks thinking about whether there are schools you've heard about, schools you know about that we should set up tours for this summer. We will come to a meeting next month with some suggestions about projects we've worked on, but I'd just like to sort of throw it out there. And Dr. Kelly, you mentioned something earlier about there are programs and ideas out there. If there are certain programs that have been implemented in other school systems you've heard of, ultimately forward those schools to us, and we'll work a little bit to try to set up some tours in the summer hours. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Otherwise, I think we can hit public comment quick.
Yeah, I'm going to open it up. Is there a public comment? Anyone? 3, 2, 1, done. Okay. Any other new business or discussions that anyone wants to add to today's call?
I think the only thing I have right now is, Brian, if you want to tee up our, we're moving fast, as you can tell, guys. And so our next meeting is go through the schedule or what's up on our agenda for next meeting.
Yeah, let me, I'm actually going to go back to a little cheat sheet that I had in last week's
that's right.
presentation. Just one sec. Sounds good. So we are here, 6-3. We have gone through educational program initial space summary. We've signed off on the PDP scoring matrix. We have a site meeting on Monday that we're going to dive into a little detail on some of these sites, and we're going to talk about some of the incoming info from Sleeper Associates that's really going to help us cue in that when's the midpoint of construction, when can we start building. That ripples into all the numbers. 617 we think is a recap on everything. So you'll see the costs, an update on the comparative costs with some reimbursement projections in there. You'll see totals. We'll most likely present them as ranked in an order, so there's at least a way to understand it. Not that cost is driving the bus, but that sheet is a cost analysis, and it's probably easiest to understand from a lowest to highest, highest to lowest point of view. Let's see, we will present the schedules. We have those mostly mocked up, but based on the info from Sleeper Associates back here, they might stretch a year, 2 years in some direction. And we just wanted to get that info better ironed out before we present it to you. and we'll just maybe do a quick dry run on, we're probably going to have to spend even 20 minutes just saying, I guess this discussion is about, do you guys want to score your applicants beforehand and email them to me? Do we want to do it live? Keep in mind that if we're doing it live, it's 10, 11, 12 options and times as many committee members as we have. We can definitely do that. If you want to come into that meeting with your scoring, we can do it live. If folks want to decide, get it to us in advance, we'll do that. But be thinking about that. That's just something we want to solidify on the 17th. 24th is when we will just run back through costs. We'll see if anything's changed between these two meetings. We'll cement everything for PDP. Those will be the comparative costs and schedules that go to the MSBA. We will ask you to vote on those, and then we will have a discussion about where to draw the line. We recommend 3 options, maybe 4 options. There's no hard rule there, but I think if you really want to carry more than that, there might be a little bit of pushback coming our way from the MSBA. And then 7-1, I think we were looking at to basically have everything tied up with a bow, and we do need a motion to submit the whole PDP. But some of this stuff, the final scorecard, becomes deliverables here. So it's just nice to have another meeting. That's also when we just want to tell you about what's coming up, PSR, and in July we can maybe try to start setting up some of those site meetings to some other recent projects.
And also, just on a side note to that, Brian, so we currently have on the schedule SBC meetings at the public hearing. So the June 24th building meeting would be a new added meeting, currently not in anyone's calendars, and nor is the 7-1 because we pushed out the PSR submission by 2 weeks. So neither one of these 2 meetings are currently on your calendars.
Yep. So I think we'll probably post agendas with basically these as the agenda and insert invoices where they need to happen, et cetera. But I think we really, as Linda's alluding to, if we can't get to one of these milestones, we ultimately have to push back when we're giving this to the MSBA. And the sooner we get it to them at this phase, the sooner we start hearing back on those, a lot of what Bob was telling you about earlier on decisions, maybe not black and white decisions yet on whether a space is going to be reimbursable, but we'll get a good temperature read based on their comments back to us.
And you just mentioned something, Brian. I just want to make sure the committee is aware that the issue with the MSBA is there's basically a 2-month penalty if we delay things. The next time we submit is two months from now in order to get on their schedule again. So that's.
So I'm going to translate what both of you just said into the simple, we don't want to miss the 7-1 deadline. With that said, I know that Mr. Visconti, who is the chair of the Ways and Means Committee for the City Council, is tied up in budget hearings on the 24th. And I know that because that's when the school department has to present their budget. So I can talk to Jerry about that.
I'll also be tied up in those same meetings.
That's right, Rich. I'm sorry. Yeah, that Rich is attending all of those as well. So I don't know if we could either look at a different time. Maybe we could do a daytime meeting for that one. And I don't know if even Rich and Jerry, if you guys are going to be too deep into the weeds, the budget to entertain that thought.
Diane, the budget hearings are the 16th, actually the 17th and the 24th. So we miss those days if it's at that same time. And I'm not sure who else would be there. Who else would miss? But
what are those times? Did you say? I'm sorry.
5 o'clock on.
Okay.
It's supposed to be 5 to 7, but I'm assuming they'll go past that.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I would say either we see if we could do 3 o'clock, or we see if we could maybe push it to another night, an adjacent night. But I feel pretty strongly that we want to do our best to have you guys there, even though we're taking up even more of your time.
The dates for the budget is the 16th and the 17th, and then the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. So, and we got council meetings on those Mondays, so it's a pretty busy month. But yeah, if you can arrange it at a different time, I'm happy to be there. I'd want to be there, but it's up to you guys.
Does 3 o'clock work?
If you wanna, it's up to you, Diane, or the whole committee.
Yeah. The 17th, I couldn't do a 3 o'clock. I have contract negotiations at that time, but I could do like an early in the day. If we could do that. On the 24th, I can do a 3 o'clock. Again, if Jerry or Rich wanted to push that earlier so they have a little time between this meeting, I think that might be a good idea, because if they're going to start at 5 o'clock, those are some pretty heavy meetings.
Yeah, I agree. The mornings would be better, but it's up to you guys.
Fine with us. Really up to the committee.
Could we do noon time on both days?
I can make noon on both days.
You can buy on the lot online. I would make myself available. Yes.
Okay.
Is
How about
there
other
anyone that
folks?
it doesn't work for? Really, is the question. Yeah. Why don't we go that way? Anyway, everyone look at your calendar and see if Thursday 17th noon and noon to 2, we'll say, and Thursday the 23rd noon to 2. Does that not work for you?
Thursday the 24th.
Thank you.
I can't do the 24th at noon. 17th, no problem. I might be able to come in late for the 24th, but go with what the majority can do.
I can do the 17th or the 24th.
I can do both days also at 12.
So maybe what I'd say, Stacy, is that in the event, we'll talk leading into the 24th, and let's make sure that if you can't be there or you're a maybe, you get your scores to me and we can read them into the record.
And Jen, we can provide coverage for you. John can provide coverage for you on the 17th.
Correct.
But we know you all have real jobs to be doing.
Yeah. Thanks for figuring that out, guys. That was good.
That's all we had. We've done public comment. If there's any other new business, we would be looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Third.
Okay. So Diane Kelly did the motion, and I'm sorry, who was the one who seconded the motion?
I think Rich did.
Rich Biscay.
I was going to say everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, a couple of numbers. All right, so we will take a roll call for adjourning the meeting, starting with Mike Party.
Yes.
And
Yes.
Dr. Kelly.
Yes.
And Carl Spencer.
Yes.
And Dr. Perella.
Yes.
And Jennifer Hayes.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. And Rich Biscay.
Yes.
And Jerry Visconti.
Yes.
Excellent. That captures everyone on our roll call. Thank you, everyone. I will make sure to send out these meeting requests ASAP so that they're on people's calendars. And then, as Brian mentioned, we can just email if there's any, anything to do with it. Okay.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Thank you.